What if finding a crumpled paper while emptying the trash at a small roadside diner cost a hard-working waitress not just her job but her entire sense of identity? When Shayla discovered DNA test results carelessly discarded among coffee grounds and napkins during her evening shift, she never imagined those scientific codes and percentages would shatter the foundation of her world within 24 hours. The diner owner fired her on the spot, voice trembling with something beyond anger, something like fear. But what Shayla could never have predicted was how those discarded genetic secrets would connect her to one of the wealthiest families in America, revealing why her termination came so swiftly and what generational secrets powerful people had buried for decades. Sometimes the universe places truth exactly where it needs to be found, by exactly who needs to find it. Shayla Johnson wiped beads of sweat from her forehead as the Georgia summer heat pressed through the smudged windows of Marlene's diner, her third 12-hour shift that week. Feeling heavier than the plates of greasy hash browns she carried to ungrateful customers hourly. The cramped establishment with its faded vinyl booths and perpetually sticky floors had become both her prison and lifeline over the past 4 years. Each paycheck stretching paper thin between rent, utilities, and ensuring her teenage sister Maya could afford proper school supplies, unlike Shayla had growing up. The air conditioner wheezed pathetically overhead, circulating the scent of burnt coffee and bacon grease, while Shayla forced another patient smile despite the hollow ache in her lower back. Table 7 had been particularly demanding today, a silver-haired businessman in a suit worth more than her monthly salary who snapped his fingers for service, then complained about every item that touched his table. When he finally departed without leaving so much as a single dollar tip on his $60 tab, Shayla swallowed the burning frustration that climbed her throat like bile, focusing instead on clearing away his half-eaten meal and scattered napkins with the practiced efficiency born from 1,000 similar encounters. The remnants of expensive cologne lingered as she wiped crumbs from the marbled pattern of the worn tabletop, her movements faltering when her cloth brushed against something substantial tucked against the wall side of the booth. A sleek leather portfolio sat forgotten between table and window, its butter-soft material marking it as genuinely expensive rather than imitation. Shayla glanced toward the parking lot where she could still see the businessman sliding into his luxury sedan, then back to the portfolio which likely contained more cash than she would earn this entire month. Her fingers trembled slightly as they hovered over the rich leather, the temptation blooming hot and insistent as she thought about Maya needing new glasses and the past due electric bill sitting unopened on their kitchen counter. From across the diner, Marlene watched with narrowed eyes from behind the service counter, her thin arms crossed over her chest and mouth pinched into a judgmental line, as if already witnessing a crime in progress. The weight of those suspicious eyes pressed against Shayla's back, but it was ultimately something deeper that guided her actions, some stubborn kernel of dignity her mother had planted before disappearing from their lives completely. With a soft exhale that carried away momentary weakness, Shayla lifted the portfolio and walked directly to the lost and found box behind the counter, placing it inside with deliberate care while meeting Marlene's surprised gaze steadily. The tiny victory felt hollow with her pockets still empty, but Shayla straightened her spine and returned to clear the remaining tables, unaware that this small act of integrity would become the first domino in a sequence that would soon shatter her entire understanding of who she was and where she truly belonged in the world. Friends, before we go further, may I ask a small favor? Please subscribe to our channel. It truly helps us keep bringing you these stories, and reaching 1,000 subscribers soon is so important for us to continue. We also love hearing from you. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. It's always fascinating to see how our little storytelling circle is spreading across the world. And if you enjoyed the beginning, give this video a like, and let's share thoughts on the whole story together below. The final customers trickled out of Marlene's diner as midnight approached, leaving Shayla alone with the monotonous closing tasks that punctuated every shift like clockwork. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the checkered floor as she tied up the bloated trash bag from behind the counter, the plastic stretching dangerously against broken toothpicks and discarded napkins. Dragging the unwieldy bag toward the back door, Shayla noticed it had split slightly along one seam, forcing her to hunch down and gather the spilled contents with bare hands that would smell like coffee grounds and ketchup, no matter how thoroughly she scrubbed them later. Among the soggy debris, a crumpled paper caught her attention, its crisp letterhead and official formatting standing out amidst food waste. Curiosity overrode disgust as she smoothed the wrinkled document against her thigh, brow furrowing while processing the clinical language that detailed genetic markers and chromosomal patterns. The heading bore the Whitmore Medical logo, a name synonymous with the healthcare empire whose billboards lined Interstate 95 and whose CEO regularly appeared in national business magazines. But it was the results section that caused her breath to catch sharply in her throat. Subject sample shows 98% genetic compatibility with Whitmore family reference samples, specifically paternal line through Jonathan Whitmore III. The fluorescent light above flickered erratically, as if punctuating the revelation, casting alternating shadows across information that seemed impossible yet was printed with scientific certainty on watermarked paper. Unbeknownst to Shayla, in the cramped office overlooking the kitchen, Marlene sat rigidly before a grainy security monitor, watching with widening eyes as her waitress discovered what was never meant to be found. Her fingers trembled violently as she dialed a number programmed into her phone but never before used, whispering urgently into the receiver while never taking her gaze from the screen where Shayla carefully folded the document and slipped it into her pocket. The following morning arrived with gunmetal skies threatening summer storms, matching the atmosphere inside the diner, when Shayla arrived for her shift only to find Marlene waiting with unnaturally stiff posture and eyes that refused to meet hers. Words tumbled forth in clipped, rehearsed fashion about budget cuts and staff reductions, but the tremor in Marlene's voice betrayed deeper currents of panic flowing beneath practiced phrases. When Shayla demanded real answers, gesturing toward 4 years of perfect attendance and customer compliments, Marlene finally looked directly at her with an expression caught between fear and pity, her voice dropping to barely audible levels as she leaned closer. "Some secrets cost more than jobs, girl. Walk away if you know what's good for you." The warning hung between them like poison gas, seeping into the space where job security had existed just 24 hours earlier, leaving Shayla clutching her final paycheck with numb fingers as rain began pelting the windows, nature providing perfect accompaniment to the cold realization that forces beyond her understanding had just altered the trajectory of her life completely. Rainwater puddled around Shayla as she huddled at a computer terminal in the back corner of Oak Ridge Public Library, the fluorescent lighting reflecting off the screen where search results for Whitmore Medical populated with countless news articles and financial reports. 3 hours of systematic research had produced a thorough understanding of the healthcare conglomerate valued at $8.6 billion, but it was the family photos accompanying society page articles that sent ice water coursing through her veins. Eliza Whitmore, the 74-year-old family matriarch, stared from the screen with the same distinctive eye shape Shayla saw in her mirror each morning, the same high cheekbones and full lower lip that Maya had often commented, looked nothing like their mother. The quiet atmosphere of the library with its gentle rustling of pages and soft typing, sounds contrasted sharply with the storm building inside her mind as connections formed like lightning strikes, illuminating possibilities, too fantastical yet too specific to dismiss. History books detailed how the Whitmore fortune began 4 generations ago with pharmaceutical patents, expanding into medical facilities across 28 states, the family name synonymous with both cutting-edge research and old-money political influence. As rain continued falling outside, Shayla printed several articles and photographs, hands trembling slightly while collating pages that potentially explained her entire existence in ways her missing mother never had. Returning home through the downpour, Shayla immediately noticed the black SUV parked across from their apartment complex, its tinted windows revealing nothing, while its very presence announced watchful intent. Mrs. Abernathy from apartment 4C intercepted Shayla at the mailboxes, nervously explaining how men in expensive suits had been asking questions about her all afternoon, claiming to be insurance investigators but lacking proper identification. Fear crystallized into sharp clarity when Maya burst through the door 20 minutes later, backpack clutched protectively against her chest, and tears streaming down her face as she described being approached by a strange man outside school who knew details about their lives no stranger should possess. As Shayla held her trembling sister, pieces aligned in her mind with terrible precision, the realization blooming that the DNA results had not been carelessly discarded but deliberately planted, meant to be found by someone specific. Possibly as leverage in some complex Whitmore family power struggle in which she was both pawn and potentially queen. Staring out the window at the SUV still idling beneath flickering streetlights, Shayla recognized the first true crossroads of her life taking shape with brutal clarity. The choice between pursuing revelations that might complete her identity or retreating into protective anonymity for Maya's safety, understanding with absolute certainty that the powerful figures now circling their lives would allow her the luxury of only one path forward, and whatever choice she made before sunrise would irreversibly alter everything she understood about family, truth, and survival. Sleep eluded Shayla completely that night, her mind spinning endless scenarios while rain pelted against thin windows, and Maya finally succumbed to exhaustion on the worn sofa. Morning arrived with unexpected silence, the storm giving way to heavy stillness broken only when Shayla discovered a manila envelope that had been slid beneath their apartment door sometime during the pre-dawn hours. No return address marked the plain surface, just her name written in elegant cursive that spoke of education and purpose. Inside lay yellowed newspaper clippings carefully preserved in plastic sleeves, their headlines sending cold recognition through her chest. Whitmore family made missing. Police question staff about Jenkins' disappearance. Search for missing woman abandoned after 2 weeks. The articles dated back 30 years, each featuring a photograph of Catherine Jenkins, a young black woman whose familiar eyes stared back at Shayla with uncanny resemblance, the same eyes she saw in Maya and in her own reflection. Nestled among the clippings lay a handwritten note on cream stationery, bearing just 9 words in the same elegant script. Your grandmother deserved justice. So do you. The cramped apartment suddenly felt exposed, vulnerable, its thin walls offering illusory protection as shadows seemed to shift beyond partially drawn curtains, sunlight occasionally reflecting off what might be camera lenses or watching eyes from vehicles parked across the street. When confronted with the clippings and her mounting suspicions, Maya broke down entirely, confessing through shuddering sobs that she had secretly sent her own DNA sample to a genealogy company 4 months earlier, desperate for any connection to the parents who had abandoned them to foster care when Maya was just 2 years old. The test results had arrived while Shayla worked double shifts, revealing complex genetic markers that prompted follow-up inquiries from the company's research department and apparently triggering events far beyond their understanding. Cradling her sister while processing this revelation, Shayla experienced the distinct sensation of reality expanding beyond the boundaries they had known, their struggles for rent, money, and basic survival now dwarfed by powerful currents pulling them into deeper waters where family secrets worth billions might easily justify eliminating 2 inconvenient young women from poor backgrounds. Yet amidst the fear coursed something equally powerful. The realization that someone with inside knowledge was actively helping them, someone who had preserved evidence for decades and recognized their connection to Catherine Jenkins without ever meeting them, someone navigating the dangerous spaces between Whitmore wealth and their vulnerable lives with apparent expertise. As sunlight crept across faded carpet revealing dust motes dancing in silent witness, Shayla understood with absolute clarity that their ordinary existence had shattered permanently, replaced by dangerous new terrain where unseen forces both threatened and protected them, for reasons still crystallizing like distant mountains glimpsed through fog that would either bring salvation or destruction once fully revealed. The knock came 3 days later, 3 precise taps that somehow conveyed authority despite their restraint. Shayla opened the door to find Eliza Whitmore standing in the dingy hallway like an apparition from another world. 70 years carried with elegant poise in a cream silk suit that probably cost more than 6 months of Shayla's former salary. The family matriarch glided into their apartment, trailing Chanel perfume that seemed to battle the lingering scent of microwave dinners and discount laundry detergent for dominance in the small space. Her assessing gaze swept across water stains on the ceiling and the mismatched furniture with neither judgment nor compassion, merely clinical observation, while Maya retreated to the bedroom without being asked, understanding instinctively that adult matters requiring privacy were unfolding. From a designer handbag, Eliza withdrew a checkbook bound in soft leather. Her manicured fingers steady as she filled out an amount featuring more zeros than Shayla had ever seen directed toward her name, tearing the check free with a precise motion before placing it on the coffee table between them. Financial security can provide peace of mind while uncomfortable questions fade into memory, Eliza offered, her cultured voice carrying no threat yet somehow filling the room with unspoken power dynamics as ancient as wealth itself. Shayla studied the older woman whose features mirrored her own in ways that statistics and coincidence could never adequately explain, then deliberately pushed the check back across the scarred table surface, requesting truth instead of hush money, with quiet determination that seemed to genuinely surprise the Whitmore matriarch. Something almost like respect flickered across Eliza's composed features before she sighed deeply, removing designer sunglasses to reveal eyes identical to Shayla's own. Jonathan Sr. had certain appetites and inadequate discretion, she explained with practiced neutrality, his numerous affairs with household staff becoming almost routine during their 47-year marriage, including a lengthy relationship with Catherine Jenkins that ended shortly before her disappearance. When Shayla pressed about her grandmother vanishing without trace, asking directly if the Whitmore family had been responsible, Eliza's carefully constructed composure fractured momentarily, genuine emotion bleeding through as her hand trembled slightly against the expensive fabric of her skirt. "Some questions are better left unasked, my dear, especially when the answers might destroy lives beyond your own," she whispered, glancing meaningfully toward the bedroom where Maya remained hidden. Rising with fluid grace that belied her age, Eliza moved toward the door before pausing to survey Shayla with an expression balanced precariously between warning and something almost maternal. The check remained on the table, a silent reminder of paths not taken, as the Whitmore matriarch departed with final words that hung in the air like smoke. "Should you pursue this further, remember that some doors once opened can never again be closed, and those with nothing to lose are rarely the ones who suffer most when truth collides with power." The plain white business card appeared mysteriously tucked beneath her windshield wiper the morning after Eliza departed, bearing only a name, address, and the words 8 p.m. tonight in the same elegant handwriting from the manila envelope. Rain began falling again as Shayla navigated unfamiliar streets toward the outskirts of town where retired Detective Marcus Wade resided in a modest bungalow with peeling paint and overgrown hedges belying the sharp intelligence that greeted her at the door. A man in his 60s with dark skin, mapped by deeper lines around cautious eyes, ushered her inside without pleasantries, leading her through narrow hallways where case files and newspaper clippings covered every surface like archaeological layers documenting decades of human tragedy. The living room had transformed into an investigation hub centered around Catherine Jenkins, photographs and timeline notes covering an entire wall while rain pattered against windows, creating a melancholic soundtrack to their meeting. Marcus spoke with the measured cadence of someone accustomed to testifying under oath, explaining how 30 years ago he had been the lead detective assigned to investigate the disappearance of a Whitmore household employee until political pressure and thinly veiled threats forced the department to declare it a voluntary departure despite compelling evidence to the contrary. The Whitmore family had buried evidence, bought police silence, and ensured the case disappeared from public interest through strategic donations to the city and personal payments to key officials, including his former captain. Watching Shayla absorb this information with increasing horror, Marcus shifted weathered files to extract a confidential medical report never included in official records, his voice dropping lower as he revealed the critical detail that Catherine Jenkins had been approximately 12 weeks pregnant when she vanished. The paternity was never officially established, but hospital records indicated Catherine had scheduled prenatal appointments at a Whitmore medical facility where test results were subsequently purged from their system. Most damning was testimony from another household staff member who overheard Jonathan Whitmore Jr. telling his father he would handle the situation personally just 2 days before Catherine disappeared, suggesting the son, rather than the father, may have taken direct action to protect family interests and reputation. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating case photos momentarily, as Marcus clasped Shayla's trembling hands within his own steady ones, offering both warning and alliance in the same breath. The Whitmore empire was built on medical innovations derived from genetic research that sometimes operated in ethically questionable territory, he explained. Their billions dependent on maintaining both scientific advantage and pristine public image, making anyone with potentially damaging information or claims against the family bloodline targets for sophisticated elimination. As she prepared to leave, Marcus pressed a burner phone and small recording device into her palm, becoming in that moment more than an information source, but a true mentor figure offering both guidance and practical tools for the dangerous path ahead. The rain intensified as Shayla departed, matching the cold realization flowing through her veins that she was pursuing answers about a grandmother whose pregnancy suggested she herself might be not just connected to the Whitmores but potentially a direct descendant of the family, whose wealth and power now actively threatened her existence. 1 week after meeting Marcus, Shayla returned home from a job interview to find Jonathan Whitmore Jr. leaning against a glossy black Bentley parked directly before her apartment building, his presence as deliberate and imposing as a storm front rolling across summer skies. The current CEO of Whitmore Medical stood in stark contrast to the dilapidated surroundings, his perfectly tailored charcoal suit and platinum watch reflecting afternoon sunlight, while security personnel maintained discreet positions nearby, their earpieces and vigilant posture announcing protection accustomed to wealth and its accompanying threats. Without invitation, he followed Shayla up cracked concrete steps, his Italian leather shoes incongruous against beer stains and cigarette burns, marking the common areas of a building where monthly inspections existed only in tenant agreement paperwork. Once inside her apartment, his approach shifted between tactics with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to boardroom negotiations, offering $7 million cash for her silence, before pivoting seamlessly to explaining how unfortunate accidents befell those who threatened Whitmore interests, his tone remaining conversational, while implications crystallized like ice in the space between them. When neither approach produced the immediate capitulation he clearly expected, frustration cracked his corporate veneer as he paced across faded carpet, finally revealing the truth that connected Catherine Jenkins to present danger with cold precision. Whitmore Medical built its entire fortune on proprietary genetic research, he explained, their market domination dependent on breakthrough treatments derived from decades studying specific genetic markers and variations, research that occasionally required testing boundaries of consent and traditional ethics, particularly during earlier decades when regulations provided convenient loopholes. Catherine Jenkins, along with 8 other staff members, had participated in what was documented as standard healthcare screening, but actually involved experimental procedures aimed at isolating specific genetic sequences, her subsequent pregnancy becoming an unexpected variable that threatened to expose methods that would destroy the company if ever made public. His voice took on increasing desperation as he detailed how her grandmother had threatened legal action upon discovering unauthorized procedures had been performed, how similar whistleblowers in pharmaceutical history had brought down entire corporations with single testimonies, how Whitmore Medical would collapse if evidence emerged of unauthorized genetic experimentation conducted on unwitting subjects, including their own household staff, whose descendants might now carry modified genetic markers worth billions in patent potential. The systematic corruption connecting one missing woman 30 years ago to a healthcare empire built on ethical shortcuts hung between them like poison gas as Jonathan towered over Shayla, offering one final opportunity to take generous compensation before reminding her that people investigating Whitmore affairs tended to encounter tragic accidents with remarkable frequency, his words carrying both desperation and absolute conviction that preserving family legacy justified whatever actions might prove necessary against those foolish enough to threaten generations of accumulated power and privilege. Autumn moonlight filtered through grimy windows of the abandoned servant quarters as Marcus guided Shayla through the forgotten wing of the Whitmore estate, their footsteps ghostly whispers against floors that had witnessed generations of secrets. Security systems focused on protecting family areas, rather than these discarded spaces allowed their careful entry through maintenance access, Marcus navigating with the confidence of someone who had studied blueprints extensively while waiting for someone worthy of truth to finally appear. The musty air carried decades of dust and forgotten lives as they reached the third room along the narrow hallway, its peeling wallpaper and simple iron bed frame preserved like a museum to servitude. Catherine slept here 9 months before disappearing, Marcus whispered, directing Shayla towards specific floorboards beneath a faded oval rug, the wood groaning in protest, as they pried up planks to reveal a small cavity containing a leather-bound journal wrapped protectively in oilcloth. Moonbeams illuminated the pages as Shayla turned them with trembling fingers, discovering her grandmother had meticulously documented unauthorized medical procedures performed on staff under guise of routine health screenings, detailed notes about experimental genetic modifications designed to enhance specific traits, and blood test results showing unusual markers appearing in her own system months before discovering her pregnancy. The most damning pages contained dated entries proving Catherine had realized the true nature of Whitmore research only after discovering her unborn child carried artificially engineered genetic sequences never before seen in natural human development, her growing horror evident in increasingly frantic handwriting as she planned to expose everything while securing legal protection. The final entry, dated 3 days before her disappearance, contained a single sentence that stole breath from Shayla's lungs. "They created something new inside me, and I will not let them take my daughter for their collection." Photographs tucked between later pages showed a newborn baby, then a toddler with Shayla's eyes, confirming with absolute certainty that her mother had been born from these experiments before Catherine managed to hide her child from Whitmore reach, explaining why Jonathan Jr. had reacted with such panic upon discovering the DNA test results connecting this genetic loose end directly to family bloodlines. Their discovery shattered into chaos when security alarms suddenly blared throughout the estate, floodlights sweeping across the grounds, as Marcus urgently pressed the journal into Shayla's hands, along with car keys and an address, instructing her to flee through the kitchen delivery entrance while he created a diversion. Age vanished from his movements as Marcus transformed into the detective he had once been, determination straightening his spine as he promised to delay security forces long enough for her escape, his final words following her into the darkness like a blessing. "Your grandmother fought to give your mother freedom. Now honor her courage by finishing what she started." Clutching evidence of generational injustice against her chest, Shayla ran through moonlit gardens hearing shouts and a single gunshot behind her, tears streaming down her face as she realized Marcus had willingly sacrificed himself to ensure truth survived, making her the sole carrier of secrets powerful enough to topple an empire built on exploitation of the powerless. Chandeliers cast golden light across the Grand Meridian Hotel ballroom, where hundreds of Whitmore Medical shareholders gathered for their annual meeting. Champagne flutes clinking amidst discussions of profit margins and market expansions, while security personnel maintained watchful positions at every entrance. Shayla moved through the crowd in a borrowed dress. Catherine's journal and flash drive containing digitized evidence clutched in steady hands as she approached the podium precisely as Jonathan Jr. concluded his presentation about revolutionary genetic therapies soon entering clinical trials. Silence rippled outward like a stone dropped in still water as she introduced herself as Catherine Jenkins' granddaughter, her voice amplified through the microphone while security began moving toward her with purposeful strides. Projector screens intended for financial charts now displayed decades-old medical records documenting non-consensual experimentation on household staff, journal entries detailing genetic modifications to unborn children, and DNA analysis proving direct Whitmore lineage through manipulated genetic material. The opulent room with its crystal and silk appointments grew deathly quiet as Shayla explained how her grandmother had discovered her pregnancy was not merely an affair but an unauthorized experiment, her child engineered with modified Whitmore genes without consent or knowledge. Jonathan Jr. shouted for security to remove her immediately, his facade of corporate composure shattering completely as officers hesitated, unsure who to obey. As the evidence continued streaming across multiple screens for hundreds of witnesses, including journalists and medical ethics board members, specifically invited through anonymous tips, the extraordinary moment expanded further when Eliza Whitmore rose from her front row seat with regal deliberation, walking to stand beside Shayla while raising one hand to halt security forces advancing under her son's increasingly desperate commands. Her clear voice carried throughout the stunned ballroom as she confirmed everything, admitting her complicity in maintaining family secrets while revealing the unexpected truth that she had personally helped Catherine escape 30 years ago after discovering what her husband and son had orchestrated without her knowledge. The elaborate charade of firing Shayla from the diner, the threatening visits, even the financial offers had been calculated efforts to determine whether this young woman possessed the same courage as her grandmother before Eliza could risk exposing decades of corruption built on her family name. Beneath the glittering chandeliers that had witnessed countless celebrations of Whitmore's success, stock values plummeted on trading screens as federal agents moved through side doors with warrants detailed enough to suggest inside information had been provided weeks earlier. The culmination arrived with Jonathan Jr. being led away in handcuffs while shouting accusations of betrayal at his mother, who stood unwavering beside Shayla, her composure intact, even as her family legacy transformed before hundreds of witnesses. Her final explanation offered quietly amidst the chaos, revealing decades of atonement through anonymous support of genetic research, ethics organizations, and secret financial provisions for Catherine and subsequent generations, creating moral complexity in a woman who had chosen delayed justice over immediate truth, sacrificing her own family to finally right generational wrongs. Morning sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the sleek modern offices of the Catherine Jenkins Foundation, the open concept space with its living plants and collaborative workstations standing in stark contrast to the cramped diner where Shayla had struggled just 1 year earlier. The multi-million-dollar settlement from Whitmore Medical had transformed not just her financial reality but her purpose in the world, providing resources to establish an organization dedicated to exposing corporate exploitation of vulnerable populations and funding legal representation for whistleblowers without means to fight powerful interests. Computer screens throughout the space tracked ongoing investigations into 27 companies with questionable research practices, while staff attorneys prepared documentation for congressional testimony scheduled for the following month. Maya called between classes at Georgetown, where she excelled in bioethics with a focus on genetic privacy rights, her voice animated while describing her upcoming internship with the Medical Ethics Board that now oversaw the restructured Whitmore medical operations. The remaining Whitmore family members who had chosen reconciliation over secrets had become unlikely allies, with Eliza herself serving on the Foundation Advisory Board, her wealth of insider knowledge proving invaluable for identifying systemic patterns of exploitation across the healthcare industry. Photographs of Catherine Jenkins now hung prominently in the reception area, alongside other courageous individuals who had sacrificed security for truth, their stories forming the moral backbone of an organization determined to prove that justice could prevail against even the most entrenched power structures. Weekly team lunches featured ongoing progress reports about victims receiving proper compensation, scientific discoveries being credited to previously anonymous test subjects, and legislative reforms directly influenced by their advocacy work. The Foundation receptionist interrupted these reflections to announce a visitor who had arrived without appointment, ushering in a young woman clutching a worn manila envelope with the desperate grip Shayla recognized immediately from her own past. Tear-stained cheeks and exhausted eyes told a story of sleepless nights and impossible choices as the visitor explained her discovery of documentation proving environmental contamination deliberately concealed by another powerful family, whose chemical manufacturing facilities had caused cancer clusters throughout her rural community. Seated in the bright conference room, where strategy sessions now replaced survival calculations, Shayla reached across the polished table to cover the trembling hands of someone standing precisely where she had stood 6 months earlier, promising resources, protection, and unwavering support throughout whatever justice journey might unfold. The cycle continued through this connection between past and future, between powerlessness transformed into agency, between secrets exposed to healing sunlight, demonstrating with perfect clarity that when one person finds courage to speak truth regardless of consequences, they create pathways for countless others to follow, their individual actions weaving together into movements powerful enough to hold even the most untouchable accountable for the choices made in privileged shadows.